Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my saying, they will keep yours also. In the world today, the stage is being set for Bible-believing Christians to be persecuted by church leaders and governments, just like Jesus was. The religion of Christ is held in contempt. His law is despised, and God's people must now choose to stand in defense of truth and righteousness. As they do this, they will be labeled as terrorists, extremists, and a threat to society. And those who don't have the backbone now will be found on the opposing side, uniting with the enemies of our faith.
On January 6, 2021, rioters stormed the Capitol building, causing congressmen and women to take shelter for fear of their lives. 5 people died, and many are still questioning how this travesty occurred and what should be one of the most secure places in the United States. Media is talking about it right now, so I want to know from you, what have you heard and what are your thoughts about it so far?
I find it unbelievably hard to believe that they were capable of making it inside of the Capitol building in the first place. So that's what struck me right when I heard about it. I was like, how is that possible? How did all those people get in there? And was there no security, or what was security doing?
I heard a lot of different conspiracy theories about it was set up or it was staged or the government planned this. So it's you don't know what to believe now because no matter what the government put out, you don't know. They block so much from what they're actually telling you.
What I learned is that I heard so many different things like they said, but I just know you can't trust the news anymore. They're so different and everything they do is so different that we're not ever going to get the truth. We aren't. And I don't want to watch the news anymore because it's so different. If you go to CNN or Fox, they're so different that I just don't trust anything really.
Since then, there has been a resurgent call for the American government to identify and root out who they deem as domestic terrorists.
Looking forward, that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of a country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians. And unfortunately, I think there has been this momentum that has been generated as a result of, unfortunately, the demagogic rhetoric of people that just departed government, but also those who continue in the halls of Congress.
So I want to ask you, what were your thoughts on that when you heard it?
I was taken aback because me as a believer, I understand signs of the times. I understand that certain things are going to take place before Christ's return. And so when I see those signs and I see those symbols on the news and things of that nature, and I hear it in the atmosphere, I see now that the enemy is gearing up and he's trying to deceive the entire world, and he's trying to take as many people down as he possibly can.
When I had heard that clip, it made me very nervous because it seems like they're no longer trying to hide it. They were pretty blatant and out front and just frankly saying anybody's on the table. We all know the incident that happened at the Capitol and different groups that we definitely need to keep our eye on, but they didn't really mention them specifically. They mentioned everybody.
In an article published by The Intercept, it further reveals the implications of such legislation to go after so-called domestic terrorists. It states that importing the anti-terrorism framework risks creating broad and vague powers that could be used to go after activists or religious minorities. Now, this raises some very serious questions. How do you define a religious extremist? Who will be defining them, and which groups actually fit into this profile?
When you look at their process and they start looking at, okay, what characteristics are we looking for as we're building this profile of a potential extremist? What are we talking about? A religious extremist? Are we talking about Christians, evangelical Christians? What is a religious extremist? Is it somebody who's pro-life? I mean, where do you take this? You start looking at, okay, well, obviously you have to be a white person. Obviously, likely male. Libertarians, well, if anybody who loves freedom, liberty, maybe has an American flag outside their house, or people who, attended a Trump rally. Once you start walking this down the path, you see where it leads to a very dangerous undermining of our civil liberties, our freedoms in our Constitution, and a targeting of almost half of the country.
The thing that struck me so much about that John Brennan video is it would be one thing if they were saying, look, there's a band of people, 20 here, 50 over here, who wear swastika armbands, who still are in the KKK, there's maybe 2,000, we need to... That's not what they're saying. What he's saying is the exact opposite. Every group he lifted, even libertarians, it's essentially he's defining the insurgency as anyone who has an ideology other than neoliberalism. In other words, other than the ruling class view that is about to congeal and merge with the power of the state. And what they're talking about explicitly, Tucker, is using the tools that they used to take ISIS off the internet, the tools that they used to destroy Al-Qaeda. They're talking about it as a second war on terror. And that first war on terror, no matter what your views were originally at the beginning of 9/11, ended up eroding not civil liberties just elsewhere, but here at home as well.
How would you define, Corbin, a religious extremist?
I would define a religious extremist as someone who resorts to violence to get their religion across to someone.
I would say it's someone who uses their religion to drive a deeper down goal that I think is buried so far within them that they have no idea it exists, and religion helps them execute that said goal.
Just any hate speech, anything that's derogatory towards others.
I think it's someone that uses their religion to incite fear, and they use it with violence in order to get their point across.
Do you think that this type of legislation is giving the government too much power to intrude in our lives and in our privacy, if it were passed?
Yes, I do think so, because there's already a stigmatism of like certain religions where they think they're already terrorists and things like that. So I think that is very intrusive.
This specific set of laws may not take too much power, but I think it keeps the door open for them to continually crack down even more and more. And this to me is a total fear tactic.
I think it's definitely an infringement on our rights too, which I'm not usually an advocate for. I feel like if it's for the better good, then so be it. But I think something like the Capitol can't happen again. But at the same time, I think we need the ability to stand up to a system that might not be working for everybody and that needs to be fixed. And sometimes that might require violence.
The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 9, the thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. For preaching against sin, the union of church and state, and for doing evangelism, Jesus himself was viewed as a religious extremist. His words and motives were maligned, and he was accused of perverting the nation. Luke 23 and verse 2 says, and they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ a king. Even though Christ was innocent, Mark 15 verses 7 through 11 tells us that Jesus was grouped with Barabbas, a man who really was an insurrectionist. The guilty prisoner was freed while Jesus was sentenced to death.
The apostles who carried on Jesus' work of spreading the everlasting gospel were persecuted, shut up in prison, and killed fulfilling the earth with Christ's teachings. They were blamed for turning the world upside down. The Bible lets us know in Acts chapter 17 verses 5 and 6, it says this, but the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, these that have turned the world upside down are come hither also.
Moreover, with striking similarity to the future events of Bible prophecy, the experience of Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, clearly foreshadows what is transpiring and what will transpire for God's people. During the time of Luther, Satan worked to stunt the growth of the Protestant Reformation. He inspired wild fanatics and religious extremists to arise who claimed that they were chosen to extend Luther's work. However, they stirred up strife and resorted to violence until the fields of Germany were filled with blood.
And now Wittenberg itself, the very center of the Reformation, was fast falling under the power of fanaticism and lawlessness. This terrible condition had not resulted from the teachings of Luther, but throughout Germany, his enemies were charging it upon him.
Although this charge was without the slightest foundation, it could not but cause the reformer great distress. That the cause of truth should be thus disgraced by being ranked with the basest fanaticism seemed more than he could endure. On the other hand, the leaders in the revolt hated Luther because he had not only opposed their doctrines and denied their claims to divine inspiration, but had pronounced them rebels against the civil authority. In retaliation, they denounced him as a base pretender. He seemed to have brought upon himself the enmity of both princes and people. How often censure and reproach are cast upon God's faithful servants because they will stand fearlessly in defense of the truth.
The same accusations and labels that were given to Jesus, the apostles, and Martin Luther will be brought upon Bible-believing Christians in these last days.
Extreme in my view, in my point of view. When I think as a general norm, as a societal norm, if the government is, if it's a general thinking as a whole, and then you have some people who don't think that way, they're going to be considered extremists. They're going to be considered anti what we have, and I think that's what the government is going to try to label the Christian, the believers as. We don't believe in homosexuality because it's against the Bible. Certain things that they may believe in, I think they're going to use that moniker and give us extreme because we believe in what we believe in and not as a general rule.
How soon do you think these laws and policies will be more directly targeted to Bible-believing Christians? Because now it's sort of general.
Right.
But very soon it'll be directly targeted.
Right. So me personally, this is the guy hasn't spoken to me, but I do believe in this new administration that's coming up now that it's going to be allowed. It's going to, unless the believers, unless we come together to pray, this is going to be the doorway that the enemy is going to use to usher in that thought, to usher in that those policies and those laws, because they have control of the Senate, they have control of the entire government. So because of that fact, they're going to rule from a high place to say, these are the rules. And I do believe that they're going to cause a distraction. And while that distraction is going on, they're going to implement these laws and they're going to put these rules in place and say, while you were doing that, okay, here's the laws.
Exactly.
So you have to follow the laws of the land. If you don't follow the laws of the land, then you will be punished, you'll be incarcerated, things of that nature. So I believe in this administration, if the believers do not pray and come together to circumvent what's going on, then it's going to happen through this administration.
Oh yeah, and with each administration, as the years go by, the days, the months, we're getting closer.
Absolutely.
Will it all be fulfilled in this one? It's yet to be seen.
Absolutely.
But we have to be ready. Very, very soon, the government is actually going to mandate, now this may sound strange to you, but I'm going to share it with you. The government very, very soon is going to mandate a day of worship as a solution for climate change, domestic terrorism, and all of these things. Now, I'm going to share that with you. Have you ever heard of something called the National Sunday Law?
No.
Have you ever heard of something called the National Sunday Law?
No.
I've never heard of that, no.
Okay, so this is something that, based on the Bible, is going to be enforced in America very soon. But to explain it to you rather simply, it's something that has happened in times past. The first one, when we look at Constantine, Emperor Constantine, back in 321 AD, he actually instituted a national Sunday law, right? Where people had to worship on Sunday, as a day of rest. It was looked at as a day of rest, right? But then also in America, there was talk in the 1800s, in 1888, for a national Sunday law. It's called the Blair Sunday Bill. You can look it up online. And there, lawmakers here in America were advocating to do the same thing, to have Sunday be a day of rest where shops are closed and you have to go to church on Sunday. And the reason why not only has it happened in the past, but based on Bible prophecy, it will come in America and be enforced, is because people think this will be the solution to stop terrorism, to stop immorality, to stop climate change, and all of these problems that we face from day to day. And so what I want to do is to leave with you both a gift in here. And guess what the title of the book is?
National Sunday Law.
National Sunday Law, right? So this book right here, basically, it explains in more detail from the Bible what the National Sunday Law is and how very soon it will be enforced here in America and around the world. So I hope that you will be blessed by it. Any comments, anything that, I said that maybe you want to research or think about?
Yeah, I think that, oh, you're wanting to be...
Yeah, if there's anything,
I mean, I think that we had a really good conversation before, regardless of our religious beliefs, and I think that we're able to exchange that fluidly, which is nice to hear. I'm not a religious person, but I appreciate having this conversation with you. And that's interesting. I didn't know that this was happening or that there was even talk about that. So I think it's cool that you were sharing that with us. We appreciate it. Well, I'm speaking for both of us, but I know he appreciates it too.
Based on 1 Kings 18 and Revelation 13, Bible prophecy shows us that those who worship God according to Bible principles, keep the seventh-day Sabbath, and teach others to do the same, will be declared as enemies of the state and will be held accountable for the evils and calamities that occur by sea and by land. The book The Great Controversy says, "And then the great deceiver will persuade men that those who serve God are causing these evils. The class that have provoked the displeasure of heaven will charge all their troubles upon those whose obedience to God's commandments is a perpetual reproof to transgressors. It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath, and that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced, and that those who present the claims of the fourth commandment, thus destroying reverence for Sunday, are troublers of the people, preventing their restoration to divine favor and temporal prosperity."
Even now, we can see that Seventh-day Adventism is being brought to the forefront. Yet our history, doctrines, and motives are being discredited, derided, and debased. When we reach the standard that the Lord would have us reach, worldlings will regard Seventh-day Adventists as odd, singular, straight-laced extremists. We are made a spectacle unto the world and to angels and to men. When the fingers are pointed at us, how many will stand up for the truth, and how many will give up the faith to quell the displeasure of the masses?
So the last question that I want to ask you, Brian, is seeing what will take place based on Bible prophecy, how are you personally preparing for that time when, if you are faithful, if I'm faithful, we will have to stand against the majority as we stand up for Christ? How are you preparing for that time?
Me personally, I have decided to commit myself to ownership, entrepreneurship, so that way nobody can necessarily trample anything that I have going on, because times are getting worse. And how do we guard ourselves from the world? And I think one of the ways is financial literacy and working for yourself.
And I like what you said, about being an entrepreneur and being self-reliant. That's the word that I would use, self-reliant from the government. And that does have its foundation even in Scripture as well. What about anything spiritually? Are you doing anything spiritually to prepare?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Spiritually, Off air, we kind of talked about how I was fasting. Spiritually, that's the reason for everything. Let's be very clear. But yeah, spiritually, I'm looking to continue to speak life into my clients, the people that I work with. Fast, read, pray, because it's getting almost there.
Yes,
it's
sir.
getting close to the end. And I know we've had our talks, and we're seeing some of the things and the policies that are being pushed upon us, and that's really all you can do is protect yourself and help as many people as you can, because some of the things and the powers that be have set this stuff in motion years before I was even born. So you do what you can. So spiritually, you got to stay guarded up, put on the full armor of God, continue to read, continue to pray, and fellowship. That's kind of what I'm doing, and I use the platform of my business to carry those things out.
What are you doing to prepare for that time?
Oh man, listen, He's been speaking to me personally. He had me get up at 3 a.m. in the morning to pray. And I believe it's a season and a time for people to be spiritual and to operate in the supernatural. Because the enemy is going to come and deceive the entire world, even the elect, that if we don't operate from a spiritual perspective and a supernatural perspective, we will be eaten alive.
Ephesians 6, verse 10 through 11. Finally, my brother, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God so that we'll be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Plan to stand for Jesus by meditating on his promises day and night and keeping his commandments.
I'm preparing to stand up for Jesus by applying his promises to my life daily, memorizing his scripture daily, and learning how to trust him at his word. I'm also preparing to stand up for Jesus by also searching my own heart and asking God to reveal any wickedness or iniquity that is in me that needs to be rooted out.
I'm preparing to stand up for Jesus by guarding the avenues of my mind, forming right habits through his grace, and choosing to surround myself with positive influences that will lead me heavenward.
In times like these, I'm preparing to take a stand for Christ through diligent self-examination, praying for a courageous heart that's unwilling to compromise any of the Bible standard, praying for discernment, to be able to perceive false teachings, and for boldness, to be able to call them out, and establish others in truth and in righteousness for their edification and preparation for the second coming of Christ.
Viewer, the scenes foretold in the book of Revelation are soon to break upon us as an overwhelming surprise. What preparation are you making for that time? Will you be found on the Lord's side or on the side of Satan, the great rebel leader? If we are Christ's, then we have nothing to fear. The psalmist says, "What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me." Isaiah further declares, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper." Christ will give us the power to stand up for him. Just give him your life today.